I'm Polly.
I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tom. And together we're Overland Trail. So over the last 6 months, I guess, you may have seen that we've been travelling across Europe overland. We've got 2 converted Toyota Land Cruisers. We had ours first, and then Aaron copied us.
With a slightly worse one.
A slightly rustier.
We pressured him into buying a worse one.
Yeah.
It's not the first time they pressured me into buying something.
Well, we sold you the dream.
Yeah.
And we've been just having the most incredible time. We've been travelling, firstly across Western Europe. We started out with an off-road expedition in Portugal.
Back in March.
Yeah.
For reference, if you're watching this later, it's now
November.
mid-November.
Yeah.
Getting mid-November. So we've been on the road, or been travelling, we should say, because update coming. We're not on the road just now for the best part of 9 months already. Across Europe, we spent a huge amount of time in the Balkans, in Albania, and then in Bosnia and Serbia when you joined us, and then we headed over into Turkey. We were about a month in Turkey in the end.
Yes. Yeah. And the end destination was originally Australia.
Is Australia.
Yes.
But there's a few blockades that have sort of come up along the way. What we set out to do originally was to travel from the UK to Australia entirely overland with our own vehicle. We kind of had that idea back in, I've had the idea for years, but we sort of started talking about it seriously in maybe 2019, something like that. Yeah, early 2020. Formulated this plan of what was going to happen. But then a few things happened geographically.
First, COVID happened and delayed us by 2 years.
That happened. And then the
many
big one,
things,
the old big Vladimir interrupted us.
So initially we were planning on driving across Russia and then taking a ferry or shipping to Japan or South Korea and then going down that way. Bit of a roadblock there when good old Putin decided to invade Ukraine. So we decided that wasn't, firstly, not safe, but also we couldn't, on moral grounds, go through Russia. Mm-hmm. So we had our visas all sorted out, but we decided against it, even though we possibly could have gone that way, but it just wouldn't have been right.
Yeah. So Russia was completely off the cards after the invasion, which led us to a more southern route. So this was before we'd actually left. No, it was just as we left the Russian base. So we still planned to go through Russia on the day we left. As sort of the weeks progressed, it became more and more apparent that wasn't going to happen. So option 2, traditionally, if you look at sort of the overland routes through Central Asia, take a more southern route once you leave Europe. So cross from Turkey. People tend to cross into Iran.
Yeah, that's the kind of route most people tend to take, I think. Iran, Pakistan, India, down that way, and then through Southeast Asia until you get to Timor-Leste, and then you cross into Australia.
Yeah. And at the best of times, Iran is challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, depends for you guys.
Yeah, and highlight what is the difference between us.
We have some challenging Brits here.
The foreigners.
And for Iran, it's Americans, Brits and Canadians need guides to travel through Iran. So that adds a bit of inconvenience and a massive cost onto your Iran trip. But we thought initially that would work. We could make it work. If we get a guide who travels in his own car, and we can still see the country, explore it, make the most of it, spend a month or so there. And then we were traveling through Europe, going even more eastwards, and events started happening in Iran.
We started getting sort of a bit of news in.
Yeah, there's a lot of political unrest, as you've probably seen on the news. So we kind of had a bit of a crossroads, really. We could have either carried on into Iran, we saw it as a bit of a risk, or we could have turned back. And we decided to turn back, and I'm glad that we did, because we had some friends who were also overlanding in Iran. They had a couple of issues. So one of them, he got into Iran and there was issues with the police, and he had to bribe some police officers, and then very quickly turn back and go into Turkey. Make a payment,
That's
yeah.
Little fine, unofficial fine.
Unofficial fine, yeah. Cash in hand.
Mind you got one of them in Bosnia.
I did, yeah.
Segue that story in.
Yeah, I mean, it's just along the similar lines, I guess, but I don't know how much is. I think mine was more, the fine, but was there someone else as well that had issues?
Well,
there's the sort of well-known story of the way overland. That was before even the unrest. They were 2 guys, I should imagine if you're watching this channel you might have heard of them already, The Way Overland, and they had an awful experience in Iran. They were arrested, they were detained for up to 6 months, yeah. There's a lot of info around online, so go out there and read the story about that. But it was a horrible experience. They weren't guilty of what they were accused of. Already, we were a little bit like, hang on a minute, is this ideal?
In case you're not familiar, they are free and they were back on the road.
Yeah, they made it, didn't they? They were going the other way. They were going from Australia to London, so they made it. Although with 6 months in prison, I'm happy to do it a different way, I think.
Yeah. But there's lots of overlanders at the moment that have been or not just overlanders, just tourists generally in Iran that have been arrested and detained or had issues with the police just because they've been in the wrong place at the wrong time. And for us, we thought, all right, maybe it's not that much of a risk if you're outside cities, just driving through the countryside kind of thing, like staying away from protests and stuff. But it just didn't really feel like a risk we wanted to take, and if we're going to Iran with the costs that we'd have to spend on a guide and stuff, we'd want to see it properly. We want to go in a time where the country is, I guess, able to welcome visitors properly and where there's not like horrible things happening to the local people. And we just felt like it would be best to turn around and postpone Iran for another time.
Yeah, and it comes down to moral grounds as well, like the same with Russia. Like, do we really want to be giving money to that regime effectively, because it's a government licensed guide that you'd be paying to. Obviously we travel to some countries already that have maybe not the best political situations
or track record,
and you have to kind of make that decision as what is right to go see and understand, and that adds something to it, versus where you're just financing a regime and that's not helping anyone at that point. And Iran's not going anywhere. I cannot wait to travel Iran. It will be fantastic. But it's a few years down the line,
On top of that, we thought, if it would have just been the Iran situation, we might have been able to kind of just transit across quickly and then carry on. But the floods in Pakistan were a bit of an issue for us. That there's so much stuff going on that people are dealing with that we felt like it's not the right time for us to go and tourist around.
The entire roads got washed away. There was a point, and I don't think it's true now, where Pakistan was impassable east to west.
Yeah.
And that's still with Baluchistan being the challenge that it's always been, and having to use the escort and stuff. And there's some guys that have done it still this year. However, they find themselves at a bit of a roadblock now, struggling to get across Pakistan safely.
And then you get to India, and then you struggle getting further because Myanmar's still closed and does not look like it's going to open anytime soon. Neither does China, so you can't take that route either. So there's just lots of places where you might get stuck, and so for that reason we decided to turn around.
The trip is not cancelled by any means. I mean, this is an expedition that absolutely want to complete. That being said, I think it's sensible to make the right decisions about when that makes sense.
Got to put our safety first, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Right towards the end of the planned trip, before we had to make the changes, we were in Shanli-Urfa, which is the easternmost point that we got to. We had probably one of the worst days of the trip so far, starting with being, we weren't involved in, but witnessing one of Turkey's most horrific road traffic accidents that happened in recent history. It made it to international news. There's a huge record of what happened. Multiple people were killed, and we were sort of 100 metres behind.
On the motorway there for 3 hours, not knowing what's happening.
In 45 degree heat as well.
And witnessing, people very upset.
Yeah.
And it was an awful experience. And we had a good time in Turkey, but I think it's fair to say that they don't handle situations the same way that we would. There's a lot less of organisation that you get in the West, and particularly the further east that we got, we found ourselves to be in increasingly vulnerable situations, particularly when it came to driving on the road. Not that had any impact necessarily on our decisions, sort of what we wanted to do, but I think you have to weigh up what the pros and cons were. And at that point, being on the road and sort of experiencing those dangers every day wasn't necessarily a pro anymore.
Well, and we did consider at that point whether we could kind of diverge and go down to the Middle East and explore the Arabian Peninsula and that kind of area over the winter. There was some challenges with that as well, primarily that you can't take a right-hand drive car into Saudi Arabia at all, and Oman is a bit ambiguous. So we would have had to go through Iraq and then into Kuwait, and then you're kind of stuck because you have to go through Saudi to go anywhere else. We could have possibly shipped from Kuwait to the UAE or something like that, but then you're stuck there, and it's all quite large costs, so we'll keep that one for another time. There's talks going on at the moment where overlanders or overlanding organizations are trying to talk to the Saudi traffic authorities to allow right-hand drive cars in temporarily. It was a bit challenging as well, going from Turkey into Iraqi Kurdistan and then going further on into like the Republic of Iraq.
Yeah.
So.
And a couple of people that we were speaking to did do it and went that Iraq Kuwait route, and the amount of paperwork with visas and all the loops that you have to jump through just to get yourself to effectively Kuwait.
And that's it.
And then what? We can't go any further because we're right-hand drive. Both the vehicles are right-hand drive. And potentially that's an oversight and a learning, but living in the UK, if you suddenly have to source yourself a left-hand drive vehicle, that becomes more challenging. Not impossible, and we could have done it had we known that that was the exact target, but we'd never intended on going to those countries in the first place. So almost that trip you have to come back, regroup, prepare for, go and do again, which we absolutely will, you know, is on the bucket list. With that vehicle, we'll either have to get permission to take a right-hand drive vehicle, or you can switch it.
Yes.
You can convert it to left-hand drive. It costs about €2,500, which is a lot of money, but you know it might be cheaper than all the bureaucracy getting it through.
You want to do it yourself?
Yeah, I mean it's doable. I mean we do a lot of the work on the vehicles ourselves anyway. I would say Aaron's more sort of tooled up to do it, but effectively you've got to change the steering rack, dashboard.
Yeah. So if the loom is different, maybe.
Yeah, extend wiring.
Yeah.
From what I've read, it's easiest to do if you have a left-hand drive donor vehicle, and then you effectively just transfer everything over, because that's what they do in the factory. Effectively, is you know it's all the same shell underneath. Yeah. Anyway, potentially an option for the future, but
if we do that, we'll do a video.
If we do that, we'll absolutely do a video, but that's not going to be happening right now.
Not right now.
Yeah,
well, right now we don't
even
have the cars.
Right now, we do not have the car. Where are we?
We're in Canada.
We're in Canada.
Yeah.
We have come quite a long geographical way from...
In the wrong direction.
In the wrong direction, you could argue.
Quite away from good old Llanlliofer.
Yeah. Sort of to explain what we're doing and what the plan is. Obviously, we got to that situation where we effectively reached a dead end at Turkey. You know, we decided it wasn't right to continue in the direction we were going. There were very little other options that we could take. We forgot to mention Azerbaijan's closed too, so you couldn't even go up into Central Asia because that's something that I would have considered doing.
We have heard of people who got like special permission to go through one person to go through Azerbaijan to get the ferry that goes to Kazakhstan, but it just didn't seem reliable enough that we could say this is a certain route we can take.
And get permission to go and have the confidence you'll get permission to come back through because there's no other way to get out of the Central Asian countries. But that would work. I mean, we want to go do that at some point as well, or I'd like to go see Central Asia. Yeah. The other problem with Central Asia was, you know, it's now November, it was getting towards October, or September, October, when we were sort of making decisions. That's winter, and Central Asia isn't warm. Our vehicles are, you know, they're well equipped, but they're well equipped for summer. They're not winter vehicles. You have to go back there with a very different setup to make it work in those cold temperatures that you'll get.
Clothing wise as well, I think I only had like one or two pairs of long trousers. Everything else was jeans and t-shirts.
It's just so hot, like the heat of it. And I got food poisoning.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that wasn't fun. Well, that was the worst ever day. I didn't finish it because it was the worst ever day we had. I worked in the accident, which was awful. But then that evening.
We just got to Llanlliofer and we're like, oh, we finally made it. Took ages. We stopped a bunch of times because we were just taken up from the accident.
And we treated ourselves to a traditional evening meal. Involved various dancings around and spinning the food above your head. It was really good fun. It was good. I really enjoyed that. But they had this particular kind of food which is called
Sheikh kofta. I think we're probably butchering the pronunciation.
Yeah. We originally thought it was like a spicy tomato paste kind of thing.
So I was wolfing it down. I was like, oh, healthy, lovely. I need some of that.
Yeah. Turns out it was a raw lamb.
Primarily raw lamb.
With spices and tomato and stuff like that.
Good hygiene exactly there is not up to standard because evidently not. And we won't go into the details, but it wasn't a very nice... 6 days?
Yeah, we extended the 2 day stay to 6.
And we had to go to a hotel because there's no way I can lay in a tent in 45 degrees.
What needed air conditioning?
I mean, I don't know in hospital if I was doing that. I mean, it was serious stuff and ended up with antibiotics and then, they did.
Forcibly?
Yeah. force of
Took
design.
some convincing
Yeah.
to take these antibiotics.
Well, we kind of hope these things clear up on their own, but yeah, it didn't straight away.
Be prepared if you go anywhere where you might not be able to get like the medicine you're used to. Bring your own.
It's saved us massively.
Yeah.
Like honestly, I would be in hospital in eastern part of Turkey, potentially for a couple of weeks or so with an IV antibiotics if we hadn't have come prepared with, the right strong medication for the challenges that we faced. Back to Canada, which is where we are now. Why are we here? Good question. Why we're here is because we had the time left. So obviously we had planned this trip for a year. We got 9 months into it, and we came to the dead end as we discussed. And we're like, okay, we've got 3 months to spend. I'm not going to go back to work and go back to what we were doing before. We are travelling.
I also don't have a job. So.
You don't have a job, which is true. And we thought, okay, well, brainstorming what else we can do, and somewhere that we always wanted to come see is Canada. I was going to travel it in a way that's sort of almost as close to the overland experience that we were having already. We wanted to be self-sustaining. We wanted to experience the really off-grid parts of the country. We don't have anywhere near the budget to be touristing as such. We can't be staying in hotels. We can't be going paying entrance fees to X, Y, Z. That's not the kind of travelling that we've ever done, to be honest. So, we wanted to experience it overland. We said that we're without our own vehicles. It was not going to be cost effective to ship them over here. Realistically,
also, winter.
And winter, yeah, we had the same problem that we were looking at in Central Asia, that it was going to be significantly colder over here. You could probably camp up until about now. I think we've just started getting our real cold spells in the last few weeks. For example, outside now, it's the middle of the day and it's about 2 degrees. 1 or 2 degrees. So then it starts getting cold, and then you have to think, is it enjoyable to be in a tent, to be cooking outside, to be living outside, not having, the access to those facilities. So what we have fallen into doing, or sort of found, or been recommended, is house sitting. So house sitting, as I explained, I think in I know in the video that we did 2 videos ago, and I can pop that link in there as well to the house sitting video explaining how it all works. But very long story short, people advertise their homes when they are going away, and they want to leave their pets there, and they want someone to come and look after their pets. We sign up, we apply, we have a phone call, and ultimately hopefully get accepted. In the example that we're in now, we're actually here for 5 weeks. This is the second house that we've done since being in Canada.
Yeah.
And it's out in an absolutely beautiful part of the Ontario countryside.
Yes. Not right at Lake Ontario, but inland. Lots of land around, very nice.
Yeah,
little fire.
Yeah, lots of walking trails around here. Like they're walking in Canada, that's for sure.
And the cute pets are a benefit.
Yeah, we have one here with us.
Our special guest.
This is Pearl.
Pearl. Hello, Pearl.
It says, I don't want to be part of this video. And Ben is
around.
Causing trouble, probably.
Yeah, causing trouble. He's also a cat. I think cats and dogs. The first house that we did was 2 dogs and a cat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they were really sweet. Or this one's for 2 cats. And then we actually have 4 more house sits planned across Canada over the next 6 to 8 weeks. We leave Canada in the middle of January.
Yes, so we're still here for 2 months. We've been here for about a month already, but the next 2 months won't be in one place for as long as we have been in this particular house sit, so we'll be travelling across the country much more and sort of moving east to west from the beginning of December onwards.
Yeah, I mean, Canada's really split, isn't it? You've got the cities on the east coast, then you've got a lot of middle.
Nothing in the middle.
Where, I mean, there are things, but things that are really spread out, so realistically to travel them is quite difficult. And then you've got the west coast, where you've got Vancouver and Calgary, British Columbia and Alberta. So we're doing the east part here. We've spent some time in Toronto. We've gone to Toronto, briefly Montreal.
Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
briefly a little family trip to Pennsylvania, and we drove down in, you may have seen, our Ford F-250 pickup. And I never thought that we would be going actually to a bigger vehicle after leaving the Land Cruiser back in Europe. It's done alright, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could be worse.
Is that your whole review of it?
Yeah.
Could be worse.
I mean, it has a bunch of space in the back, but it's completely useless because we
the
don't
pickup bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a cover. So we're just driving around this massive space. I thought about putting Aaron in it, but...
Good sit.
Yeah.
We sat back there to have a picnic.
Yes,
Yeah.
we have.
Which is good. Yeah, but that is a huge, uneconomical reason.
Yeah, we think we'd find a vehicle which is actually less economical than our 20 to 25-year-old Land Cruisers, but challenge accepted, and we did find one.
Yeah, I mean, we get what we're doing, maybe 20 miles to the gallon, but that's driving very, very carefully. UK miles to gallon.
Yeah.
That's driving. Whereas even in the Land Cruiser, you're getting 23, 24.
22.
Yeah. So if you drove as saintly as we've been driving that, you might straight in. I know some of you, all of you are following the expedition with avid interest. Don't go anywhere, please. The channel is going to be as active as ever. We have a really exciting overland journey coming. Not quite as you would imagine it, but it's going to be amazing just the same. In Canada.
Bit of a twist.
But that's going to be an absolutely epic video. We can't wait to go do it. We can't wait to go film it. I'm really excited about that. But that'll be coming over the next week, as well as more content about what we're doing, where we're going. Some more content on house sitting if you want it. We didn't get too much interest in the video on house sitting. I won't push it out there. It's not something that people are interested in. But if you want to find out more, leave a comment on the video below or on any of the videos. Our Patreon is also active, and a big thank you to you guys that follow us on there. Other overland plans in the future. We won't spoil anything, but there are clear plans in place for next year for some, if we still can't continue the journey, then some other overland expeditions to different locations.
Later in the year as well,
and then later in the year.
Exciting.
Yeah, we've just organised a really big one for later in the year, so that'll be good. But we're going to keep you updated and go along. And if you've got any questions, then let us know.
Yeah. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.